Our next speaker is Melina Jampolis, MD. Dr. Jampolis is a celebrity internist and board-certified physician nutrition specialist, one of only several hundred practicing in the United States. She has fabulous background in television and radio and broadcast media. And again, I encourage you to look at your program to see the complete bio, because again, I would be here all day long if I talked about her wonderful background. But she currently serves as the diet and fitness expert for CNNHealth.com, and she lectures throughout the country on weight loss and optimal health. Dr. Jampolis.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first exposure to the organization, and I must say it seems like a wonderful organization. And Dominic, you do a fantastic job, and it was lovely to meet the people that I have so far. I am an internist and board-certified physician nutrition specialist, and I actually left internal medicine essentially to focus on my career on really preventing disease. So some of the diseases, some of the forms of neuropathy that we've talked about today are idiopathic, and that's not what I'm going to be discussing. My goal is really to inspire you to focus on those diseases that we can prevent, and there really are quite a few of them, and I truly believe in the power of food as medicine, and I hope that I inspire you to just think about it, because it's not about fitting into the swimsuit or doing paleo or going gluten-free. You'll see we can have such a profound impact on our health and on aging gracefully, which is a term that I love to use all the time. So I might go a little quickly because I've got a lot of slides and I get really excited, but I will try to keep it, and I have an 8-month-old, so I've had about 27 cups of coffee so far today because I was up all night, so my apologies in advance. But so I'm going to be talking mainly about the role of inflammation in disease, and certainly that does play a role in many different types of neuropathies as well. And we're really going to talk about the best diet. And I'm going to go in detail, kind of give you a step-by-step, walk you through that and why, because I really like to empower people, not just the what, but the why. I think that's really important. And then we'll talk a little bit about diet and disease prevention. So what if I told you in this room that you could take these 4 pills, shiny, bright colored pills, and decrease your risk of chronic disease by 78%? How many of you would be willing to take those pills, no questions asked? Raise your hand. Okay, so there's a few cynics, there's a few that wouldn't, but most of you would. Thanks for playing along. So the reality is a major study just came out and showed that with these 4 lifestyle habits, you can decrease your risk of chronic diseases. 93% decreased risk of diabetes, 81% decreased risk of heart disease, 50% decreased risk of stroke, and 36% decreased risk of cancer by following these 4 lifestyle principles. And of course, today I'm going to focus on eating a healthy diet, and you're going to hear from my good friend Jesse Pavelka later about the fitness side of it, so that'll be great. And so what I like to tell my patients all the time, and you certainly know this with neuropathy as well, there is a genetic predisposition to many of the chronic diseases. But I say this every day in my office: genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And many of the diseases that I've talked about are really a disease of modern society, of affluence, of the fact that we can find food everywhere, that we're hyper-sedentary, and that's what's pulling the trigger on these diseases. And I want to empower you to take control back. This is a little bit of an extreme example, but we'll talk about some more approachable things that you can do. And what's the most important thing, in my opinion, and this is really the new wave of medicine, is looking deeper at the cause of disease. And inflammation is a major part of that. And when I talk about inflammation, I'm actually talking about chronic inflammation, not when you hit your knee and it swells up and gets red and then it gets better. That's acute inflammation, and that's good. You need that to heal. I'm talking about a new type of inflammation that we've uncovered, which is a slow simmering inflammation where the body is constantly being challenged and feels like it's being attacked. And over time, these attack cells start damaging our regular healthy cells, and that can trigger disease. And so it's this chronic inflammation that I'm going to inspire you to take control of through your diet. So what is a healthy diet? Unfortunately, this is not an example of a healthy diet. I wish it was. I would love to eat, and maybe I did when the baby was born, have pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but not currently. I've cleaned it up a little bit. But interestingly, the government has a dietary guidelines for Americans, and based on those, the government has set up what's called a healthy eating index. And what many researchers have found is that when you follow that healthy eating index, you're not necessarily obtaining optimal health. So a group of researchers, mainly out of Harvard, wanted to go a step further and really look at specifics that were more closely associated with chronic disease. So they developed this alternative healthy eating index. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And this is the overview of it, and I'm going to go through each of them one by one, so you don't have to take notes frantically. I'm going to explain them much more detail. And it does have a lot of similarities to the Mediterranean diet, but I find the Mediterranean diet to be a little bit more vague, and I like to give my patients specific actionable items. So I feel like the alternative healthy eating index is a little bit more specific. And what research has shown is that the more closely you follow this, those in the top group that follows it versus the lowest group have a 25% decreased risk of death, 40% decreased risk of death through the heart disease, 30% less inflammation, 34% greater odds of healthy aging. That means living to the age of 70 at least, free of chronic mental and physical disease. And the great thing about this, and this to me is very encouraging because weight management is one of my specialties, but that these benefits were independent of weight loss. So you know what? I do it all day, every day in my office, try to get people to lose weight. And it's hard. And it's hard for them to keep the weight off. But the nice thing about this alternative healthy eating index is even if you don't fit into your high school genes, even if you're not even close, you can still have a profound impact on your disease risk. And I think that's really encouraging. 88% decreased risk of diabetes and actual reversal of metabolic syndrome, which is a pre-diabetes state. And I can tell you directly, I just saw a patient last week who's the executive producer of a major singing competition. I won't say anything more, but and he had complete reversal of metabolic syndrome and fatty liver disease by seeing me for 1 year and really implementing these lifestyle modifications. So what is it? 5 servings of vegetables and 4 servings of fruit a day. We all know we should eat more fruits and vegetables, but why is that so important? Because the body is constantly being bombarded by pro-oxidants, by just your regular metabolism, sitting here burning calories every day. You're producing these unstable pro-oxidants that can damage cells. Add to that stress, the environment, drugs, toxins. You read every day about some sort of toxin in the food additives that we eat that can contribute to pro-oxidants. So we need antioxidants, and naturally occurring fruits and vegetables are the best because all the studies, many of the studies that have looked at supplements, for example, vitamin E and selenium, have actually shown increased damage in some cases. So you need to get them straight from the source. They're also wonderful sources of phytonutrients, so plant-based nutrients, which really give the deep color, and they have numerous benefits: decreased risk of age-related macular degeneration, lycopene helps with prostate health and bone health, alpha-carotene is associated with decreased risk of all-cause mortality, and polyphenols is probably one of the most exciting areas. And the really exciting part of it is not only does it include brightly colored fruits and vegetables, but it also includes wine and dark chocolate, so that's yay. Anything that gives you a little pleasure along with it. But these polyphenols are plant-based nutrients, and they're developed as a protection mechanism by the plant. So they're often in the outside of the plant, and they protect, for example, in the case of the Pinot Noir grape, which is a very delicate grape, they protect the grape from environmental insults. The wonderful thing about that is that if we take them in, they can protect us too and our cells. And research is now showing that they actually work on a cellular and genetic level to turn genes off that cause inflammation. So these are really powerful drugs. So when I say food is medicine in this talk, I mean it, but this is the right kind of medicine. These are the 3 berries on your cake. So everybody, even if you don't eat your dessert, eat the 3 berries, because berries are one of the best sources of polyphenols. And grab a green tea on your way out, because those are great sources too. The other thing, just real quickly, is that fruits and vegetables, one of the most fundamental principles of weight loss is this idea of calorie density. And what research has shown is that we eat a fixed volume of food every day. So if you add lots of fruits and vegetables, even if you do a casserole, if you do a lasagna, if you do a soup, when I make turkey chili, which is one of the few things I make, I throw in double the vegetables and half of the meat. So this idea of calorie density, fruits and vegetables can really help you decrease the calorie density of your diet and more effortlessly lose or maintain weight. 1 serving of nuts or soy a day is number 2. This is really an interesting thing because for a while there, we really stayed away from nuts in the 80s. They were really high in calories. I remember when I was a resident at a hospital actually in San Jose, Santa Clara Valley Medical Center is where I trained. And I mean, I would walk around with licorice and Snackwell candy and all this because, it's fat-free. It's got to be okay. You know, there was a really anti-fat. But what we've shown is that, nuts are really a tremendous benefit. They're filled with plant protein, vitamins, minerals. They help lower cholesterol. They decrease your risk of diabetes and heart disease. And contrary to popular belief, they're actually not associated with obesity, despite their higher calorie density. So this is an integral part. And the nice thing about this is that it doesn't have to be any fancy nuts. A recent study just came out of the South showing that even just having a serving of peanuts every day can make a profound difference. In some cases, decrease the high-risk patients' population of heart disease by about 40%. So soy and legumes, also beans are one of the healthiest vegetables on the planet. They're really underrated. I think soy is a little bit more controversial, but probably because we've processed it so much in our modern day and age, making soy everything, soy ice cream, soy cheeseburgers. Yeah, okay, it's not going to be as healthy, but in its raw form, it absolutely is an integral part of a healthy diet. And beans in particular are a tremendous source. Again, you see the color. When you think of color, I want you to think of those phytonutrients that really fight disease and inflammation. You don't have to give up red meat completely, which is a relief to a lot of my patients. As long as you maintain a 4-to-1 ratio of white meat to red meat, you will have lower levels. So having red meat a couple times a week is completely okay. I urge you to try to get leaner cuts, grass-fed if you can, and certainly limiting processed red meat. When it comes to really the data on dying, processed red meat is much more highly associated with inflammation and with damage to cells throughout your body. So I encourage you to limit processed red meat as much as you can, but having red meat a couple times a week is absolutely conducive to having a healthy diet. Cereal fiber, grains have gotten a really bad rap in the last few years with some best-selling books like Wheat Belly and Grain Brain, but the reality and the science is that they are good for you in their whole grain form. In the NIH AARP study, decreased risk of death from heart disease, infectious disease, and respiratory disease. Particularly when it comes to heart, they're healthy, and gut. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. 3 servings a day can actually decrease your risk of that deep belly fat that leads to inflammation significantly. So I encourage you to make most of your grains whole grains and to keep them as a part of a healthy diet. And on the flip side, reducing the sugar and refined carbohydrates. Sugar is pro-inflammatory. Sugary drinks, these large amounts of sugar, in particular high fructose corn syrup, go directly to your liver and cause fatty liver disease and inflammation and prediabetes. So cutting back on the refined carbs and also the hidden sugar. A recent study showed that 74% of packaged foods in the grocery store contain some form of sugar. We're talking about salad dressing and bread and chicken pot pie. So it's adding up in your diet, even if you think you're being relatively conscious. So just pay attention. It's not an all or nothing thing, and balance it out with plenty of whole grains. Trans fats are the real bad guy when it comes to inflammation and heart disease. They increase bad cholesterol, decrease good cholesterol, and increase inflammation. Now, in 2006, the FDA required food to be labeled with trans fats, but unfortunately, there's a loophole. A food can have up to 0.5 grams of trans fats and still be labeled trans fat free. The Institute of Medicine says to us that there is no safe level of trans fat. So I have to just digress for a second. I'm crazy when the Girl Scout cookies come out because they have trans fats in them. So it's these cute little girls. I'm like the crazy psycho mom at the grocery store saying, stay away from the Girl Scouts to my son so he doesn't want to buy any of the cookies because they still have trans fats in them. And who eats one cookie? So start reading labels. Right? I mean, Thin Mints, sorry. I'm human. I'm a doctor, but I'm human. So you really have to pay attention. Now, there's legislation underway right now to ban trans fats completely, but be a smart consumer and look for the word partially hydrogenated on the label, and that will tell you that a product has trans fats in it, and really try to avoid those, especially if it's higher up on the ingredient list, because that means there's actually more of it in the food. You don't have to cut butter completely. This is also important. No, butter is not back like on the cover of the New York Times Magazine, but it was never out in the first place. As long as you have more of the healthy fats, you can have a little mayo on your sandwich. You can have a little butter on your broccoli. So it's really about ratios. And so when you're thinking about what you're eating on a daily basis, it's really easy to say, you know, I'm going to have a little butter on my toast, but I'm going to have an olive oil-based dressing instead of a cream-based dressing for lunch. I'm not asking people to make really dramatic changes, just to be more conscious. Omega-3 fatty acids are really one of the leading players in the fight against inflammation. They're from fish oil. I encourage you to eat fish at least twice a week, but many of my patients don't. So I think in some cases a fish oil supplement is a very reasonable alternative. This study showed that a greater than 5-year multivitamin use was associated with a healthier diet. This is more controversial. I don't think there's a lot of data showing that it can truly decrease your risk of heart disease. There was one large study in physicians that showed that it decreased the risk of all-cause mortality by about 8%. I think of it as an insurance policy, and vitamin D is emerging as a key player in anti-inflammatory diet and in general health. Moderate alcohol, yay, as a mom of 2 young kids, that's a big one for me, but really in moderation, it can be an important part of a healthy diet, and any alcohol counts. It's not just red wine, which happens to be higher in the resveratrol, which is one of the polyphenols that is really the most powerful and can protect the heart, lower cholesterol, and prevent the plaque in your arteries from being oxidized. So I'm actually going on time. I'm so impressed. I want to give you 2 examples of a healthy diet in real life. This is one of my favorite studies, and I talk about this one on CNN all the time, and I'm always accused of like working for the almond board or something like that, but I'm like, hey, it's part of the study. I'm not making this stuff up. I have nothing to, I mean, I will work for the almond board if, no, but, so what these researchers did is they decided to take the optimal cholesterol lowering diet, and they put people in a lab and put them on this diet, and it was a very low saturated fat diet. It had plant sterols, which are plant-based compounds that resemble cholesterol and compete with its absorption, soy protein, viscous fiber, so things like oats and barley, and psyllium, which is in Metamucil, and eggplant. These vegetables have more sticky fiber, it's called, and so it binds cholesterol and flushes it out of your body. And they did eat almonds, and they put a group of people, 1 on this diet, 1 on the starting dose of Lipitor, and they put them on it for a month, each group for a month, in a very controlled setting. And then they flipped them over to see, so the other group would see how they did. In 4 weeks, both groups had a 30% reduction in bad cholesterol. The Lipitor group and the diet-only group, no medication. In fact, 26% actually achieved a lower level of bad cholesterol on the healthy diet than on the Lipitor. And then the researchers said, well, okay, that's great in a lab, but can people do this in real life? And they found that at 1 year, 32% of people still had a 20% reduction in bad cholesterol, in LDL, just from taking those diet principles that I showed you and implementing those in their real life. So if that's not an example of food as medicine, to get excited about it, I get a little excited. Sanjay has to calm me down a little bit on CNN sometimes because I get a little excited when I talk about this stuff, and he's more authoritative. You know, I think that's really important. And then because this group is the neuropathy group, you know, and certainly diabetic neuropathy is a huge part of the problem. You know, it's so exciting, just little things that you can do, little things that you can take in or take out of your diet can have, I mean, 93% of diabetes could potentially be prevented by a healthy lifestyle. Studies show that consuming processed meat on a regular basis can increase your risk by 41%. Let's get that out. It doesn't have a lot of room. It should be an occasional treat, not a staple in anybody's diet, particularly if you have a family history of diabetes and your gun is already loaded. Sugar-sweetened beverages, consuming them on a regular basis, 26% increased risk. And now we get to the lower. Eating just one serving of leafy greens a day. The serving on our plate, this salad, is probably about 2. So you're good. You don't even have to eat any tomorrow. No. Can decrease your risk by 14%. Just that one change. So being more aware of it. Replacing white rice with brown rice, or even better, with whole grains, can decrease your risk by anywhere from 17 to 36%. And coffee, as long as you don't get to Starbucks, go to Starbucks and put 75 grams of sugar in it and cream and saturated fat and have they have now like a, Oreo cookie frappuccino. The woman in front of me at the airport on Tuesday, I said, really? You need a coffee fix? I mean, you might as well just go next door to the bakery and have, 3 slices of cake. But so coffee can decrease your risk of diabetes by up to 7%. And actually, the new dietary guidelines for Americans are actually going to take a stance on coffee drinking and encourage it, which is kind of surprising. So that is actually all that I had prepared. I think we'll have a few minutes for questions. But again, what I chose to do with my medical career is go back to the basics. And what Hippocrates said a long, long time ago, I don't know, I'm not a historian, Jerry, maybe you know that from studying philosophy, who knows, but let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And I hope that you've left today with just a little bit of inspiration that it really can make a difference, that every choice that you make on a regular basis can have a profound impact on your long-term health. This is just real quick. I've written a couple books, and I have a new one which I'm really excited about that's coming out in the fall, The Doctor on Demand Diet, which is kind of the synthesis of 14 years of what I've been doing in the weight management space, but also the nutrition. So keep an eye out for that. But Dominic, do you want to take a few questions from the audience? So yes, ma'am, right up front. There's not. It's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it, because I think there's a, what? Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, can you comment on whether the alkaline diet reduces inflammation, whether there is data on that? And there's a lot of myths out there and things like that, and I think that's a really prevalent one, particularly in Los Angeles. The body regulates your pH very closely naturally. If it's not regulated within a very narrow range, you die. Body cells stop working. So the fact what you actually consume, your body will adjust accordingly. Now, one of the things is, eating, this is why the diets become popular, because an alkaline diet is much higher in fruits and vegetables. And an acidic diet is much higher in meats and grains. So by default, an alkaline diet is going to be healthier, but it's not for the, effect on the body per se. So eating more fruits and vegetables is the key. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah, that's, I'm not a neuropathy expert, but I do know that alpha-lipoic acid, I've seen very good data on that, and I do use that on my diabetic patients. And CoQ10, I am not familiar with the data on that, but I use it in a lot of patients, and it tends to be depleted in people with chronic disorders. So I would say for things like that, there's probably no downside. I would, of course, discuss it with your physician, but I think I'm more aware of the data on alpha-lipoic acid, which is favorable. The problem is it's really hard to choose supplements because it's kind of the Wild West. And so, it may be useful to work with a healthcare practitioner that's knowledgeable to identify the best, source that really has in it what they say. I always get nervous about recommending stuff. Yes, sir, in the back of the room, the one waving your hand. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a great question, and I had to, for time, I had to take out some of my slides, but there is tremendous, studies show that those with higher levels of inflammation in their body have twice the risk of Alzheimer's disease. And so I think it's incredibly important in that disease state. And I think one of the most important potential anti-inflammatory polyphenols is from a spice called turmeric. There is more data. The NIH, National Institute of Health, actually sponsored a symposium on turmeric and health, and curcumin is the active ingredient. And it has a profound antioxidant effect. It actually may work with cellular neuronal signaling in the brain. So I think the potential of an anti-inflammatory diet in Alzheimer's is tremendous. I think polyphenols play a critical part in that. So blueberries, green tea, curry, curcumin, turmeric, that sort of thing. I would absolutely encourage anybody with any sort of risk factor or concern that was interested in prevention to really focus on implementing some of those dietary components. Okay, should we do one more? One more, okay. Sorry, up front, because I... The question was turmeric causing heart attacks. I have seen nothing but the opposite. I can't understand what the possible physiologic mechanism would be for that. There's always somebody that's put it in some form, but I have not seen that. I have only seen, in fact, when I was seeing a patient with end-stage pancreatic cancer, I called MD Anderson Hospital in Houston, which is the best cancer hospital in the world, and I said, tell me your most advanced protocol. And high-dose curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, was actually one component of that, as were probiotics, which I didn't talk about today, but have a tremendous role in controlling inflammation as well, because there's 10 times more bacterial cells in our gut than there are in our body, and they eat what you eat, so you got to keep them healthy too, but that's a whole nother lecture. So, okay, I think we're done. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.